Hello, you fine people. Thank you so much for resisting an entire day of filmmaking. I'm learning all about you, the audience. And maybe you're not as intense as I am, but I really do think that 12 hours of film is a great idea. I want to very briefly introduce our next panel, Pete Zuccarini, Sanjeev Chatterjee, and Claire Paris. I'm so excited. Please give them a very warm round of applause as you make your way into the theater. This is going to be so exciting. I'm practically going to hold my breath. So take it away, Pete. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Pete Zuccarini. I got very excited when I heard there was going to be a Key Biscayne film festival with ocean and island culture theme. I grew up on Key Biscayne, starting from in the 1960s, and when I was a child, the mothers would get together and take us to the beach club, and that was sort of our nursery school, preschool, and that's where I became fascinated and terrified of things in the water. You know, seeing my first set of barracuda teeth and shaking out the seaweed and seeing that all the animals that would come out of the sargassum. And as time went on, I got into, like most kids on Key Biscayne, getting into going diving for lobster and spearfishing, going over to the Bahamas, learning how to hold our breath. And at about 11 or 12 years old, I got to a point where I didn't want all of my boating experiences to be throwing sea creatures into the boat to eat. And I told my father I wanted to get into underwater photography and start taking pictures and capturing the aquatic environment. And he said, okay, how much is that going to be? And I told him how much it would be, and I wanted to get scuba gear. And he said, well, I'll make a deal with you. I'll get you a lawnmower, and you can mow our lawn for the rest of your life, and you can make money and buy all that stuff you say you want. And that's what I did. And it didn't take long, actually. Mowing lawns is pretty lucrative back in the 70s. And I very quickly was able to buy all of my diving and underwater photography equipment at about 12 years old and got really into it for the rest of my life. When I went to university, I studied fine art and made films, always gravitating back to aquatic themes. When I graduated, trying to figure out a way to make a living, I got onto a crew as an assistant over to Bimini to work with Dr. Sonny Gruber with the University of Miami. And after the job, he pulled me aside and said, you know, I can see that you're comfortable around the sharks, and whenever these crews come here, they never get the shots because they're, you know, even like the big time BBC and Nat Geo crews would come and there would be a tiger shark biting on the side of the boat, and Dr. Gruber, who was a little wild, would say like, this is the shot, get in, get the shot. And they'd be like, we don't really need that shot. And then, so I would jump in and get the shots, and then he would sell them to the crews. And then so he was sort of like farming me out as, you know, actually for a while, he was making a lot of money on me, and I figured that out, and we had to renegotiate our terms. And then eventually, I had enough of a demonstration reel that he would send out my material in advance, and I would get hired. And I started to make a lot of contacts through that process. I probably worked on 20 or 30 shark films in my early 20s. And then that led to me getting contacted by Disney to do a television special about sharks. But in that process of making films with the wild and crazy Dr. Gruber, Sanjeev, who was a professor at University of Miami, was running something called the documentary unit, and he went over to make a film about sharks, and I'll let him tell a version of that story. But when he,
which version do you want?
Well,
I'll give you
I'll let him
the
cut
version
in.
he really wants. He can't ask me, so. So I get in the water. I by the way, have no experience in any of the things that they're going to talk about. I'm just a storyteller. So he's encouraging children, Dr. Gruber, to get in the water with about heavily chummed water in the Bahamas. Come on, get in! So I think that it's pretty cool. The kids are scared. They get in. So I get in on my own to see what's going on. And then Pete comes up to me and says, "Hey, Sanjeev, get out of the water for a second." So I said, "Why?" He said, "No, no, just get out." So I get out, and later he's showing me a video of all these people with fins that are black, and my feet are shining in the water, and one shark is
Very focused. So the sharks, because they specialize in eating dead and decaying things, anything that eventually dies in the ocean turns white, and they're pretty in touch with white things, especially when they're in feeding mode. So Sanjeev is kicking his bare toes around, and I have a shot of a shark going and actually tasting his foot and then swimming away. And he just thought it was like someone's head or something. So I was like, anyway, so...
Yeah.
Then later in my career, I started to realize what an advantage my freediving skills were. I was working on films about whales and dolphins and realized that you could get better shots of marine mammals if you could hold your breath because they could sort of understand your limits. A whale very quickly realizes if I'm getting tired of you, I can just go a little deeper or swim a little faster. And as good a freediver as you are, they'll ditch you whenever they want to. So that actually makes them comfortable. And so once they understand that, they tend to be way more comfortable with freedivers than scuba or even rebreather divers. But at some point I made a freediving film with the best freediver in the world at the time, William Trubridge, and he sort of pointed out that Claire was in Miami and that maybe I should meet her and maybe she could be a good training partner. And so I started to follow the way we can now through Instagram or whatever. You feel a little guilty. You start stalking people. And so I started looking at what Claire was doing. And so Claire holds the distance swimming record underwater for swimming with no fins, swimming with bifins, so regular fins, and swimming with a monofin. And she holds all three of the national records in those distance disciplines. And she's doing it. And then to add to that, she has a 38-year-old son and 2 grandchildren, and the people who she's competing with are usually recently graduated Olympic swim team people, Division I swimmers that have decided to take up freediving and see if they can get into this niche, and none of them have been able to touch her yet. So she's fending off the best female athletes in the country in swimming for distance underwater. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing, and I really could learn a lot from her, even though I'd been swimming with cameras and swimming with animals my whole life. And I knew what the distances were. So I thought, man, that would help me a lot if I could get that good. So we started training together, I don't know, many years ago now. But then something interesting happened, because now I work in sort of mainstream Hollywood films, because I've become a specialist in doing underwater scenes for movies. And I was pitching to James Cameron, meeting him to work on Avatar, the sequels, with the next one that was coming, and the next one have a lot of water in them. And they're using this new technology called performance capture, where they're gonna capture live images of people, basically 3D modeling in real time with like 50 cameras underwater, and any bubble in the water will create a glitch in the machine camera learning. And so there can't be any bubbles in the water. And so as sort of a hazing to see like how, my interview with Jim was like, how will you solve this problem? How will you get me all this footage of these actors and stunt people underwater with no bubbles? And, they had already had a lot of people tell them different ways of, and I thought, well, are the actors going to be holding their breath during the scene? And he said, yes, there can't be any bubbles. I said, well, it shouldn't be too difficult to put together a crew of professional underwater camera people who can hold their breath longer than any actor in the world. So we can just do it freediving. And he looked at me kind of puzzled, because he had been inventing technologies as he likes to do. He said, you mean you all just breathe up together and you'll just freedive? And I said, yeah. He goes, that's brilliant. And I was like, the simplest sometimes is the best idea. And so I assembled a crew of professional documentary filmmakers, and all people who, like me, had spent their lives working, swimming with cameras, holding their breath. And so, but then once I pitched the idea and he went for it and I got hired, and it was going to be years of filming people in the water, because all of those animated creatures you see in the Avatar movie are actually real people, which is kind of weird, but yes, they were all actually performed. And so that's about the time I started training with Claire and Ricardo, her husband, and I needed to make sure I showed up ready. So I never wanted to be the first person up, you know, with Jim Cameron, because he's a very exacting director. But then it came to be that over the years, I worked on a film called Deepwater Horizon, which is about the oil spill which contaminated the Gulf of Mexico. And Claire is actually involved in a long-term study of the effects on the wildlife in the Gulf of Mexico. And then I was working on a film called Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and the director, Ryan Coogler, said to me, you know, if you're assembling your, you know, we need someone who speaks Spanish to train some of these Mexican actors that we love. And do you know anybody? And do you know this woman, Claire? Because she's been our deep water consultant for us to build our worlds with our animation. So all the worlds were built from Black Panther, consulting with scientists, and Claire was one of the principals on that. So we started to have this interesting overlap where I was like making these Hollywood scenes and she was like the real thing. So anyway, I'll turn it over now. So this group of people, so at some point while I was training and working on films that were either fantasy stories or stories about real people, like the Diana Nyad story that I worked on recently, and I realized I have a story right in front of me because Claire is so amazing as a diver and as a scientist, and in the way that I brought my water expertise to have a niche in the film business, she sort of created her own niche. In fact, teaches the only course in the world entitled Scientific Freediving, where she teaches young scientists at Rosenstiel how to use freediving as a way to be more efficient than scuba diving to collect data or do whatever science project they have or research endeavor they have, where holding your breath and going up and down is going to get your data collected more efficiently. And I had started, and she recruited me to do a lecture because I deal with equipment underwater, holding my breath. I help out a little bit every year on that class. So another collaboration we have. So when I had decided I'm making a film about Claire, I realized I needed help because it's, you know, to make a good film, I'm gonna need. The film is inherently collaborative because there's just so much you need to do to make a film. And Sanjeev and I had collaborated on some films years ago, one on manatees and one called One Water, about freshwater condition worldwide. And we sort of decided that we would make a film and put it under the umbrella of the One Water brand, and it would be about the health of the oceans and the inspiration of Claire as a scientific freediver as a sort of core protagonist for our story. So I'll turn it over to Sanjeev now.
The only thing I want to say is what you're going to see is really a very thin sliver of the film that we aspire to make. This particular version was put together last week. I finished yesterday.
Yeah, it's not actually even.
I didn't see it.
It's not
She
the
hasn't
film, and
seen
it's not even an excerpt of the film. It's kind of like, this is you're part of the genesis of this film.
Correct.
I thought it would be interesting to do a panel on like how people come together to make a film, but you're gonna see like us in the sort of awkward stages, and then hopefully 4 years from now you'll see a full-length thing that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, right now the film has no funding, and it's a pretty much you will not realize it's pretty much homegrown, so don't hate us for that. Right, so that's where we are. Claire, you have something?
So I'm very humbled by what you guys are saying about me, and making this film is not really about me. It's about, you know, how you challenge yourself in search of something that is meaningful, right? And I have to say that Pete is a real thing, and Sanjeev is a real thing too. I'm a real scientist, but I started freediving only 10 years ago, so I still have a lot to improve. While at least Pete has been diving since he was a little kid, so he's really the real thing. And what I want to say is that everyone can learn how to hold their breath, because you first have to learn how to breathe, and it's very useful to learn how to breathe in these times where everybody is a little bit anxious. And also the ocean is my world, and every other breath we take is coming from the ocean. And the freediving is really a true connection for me. It's a deep connection with the ocean. So as a scientist, my quest is to learn more about, mostly I'm studying tiny little planktonic larvae, like every large organism, or most large organism in the ocean, start small. And so we don't see that, and that is also the connection with the Deepwater Horizon spill, because there's things that we see from the surface, but the ocean is three-dimensional, and it can be affected by ocean pollution. And those planktonic organisms are very fragile. But so I study the transport dynamic of these planktonic organisms until they become very large marine predators. And then to understand a little bit better how they function, I started freediving and teaching the scientific freediving with my husband, Ricardo, who is in somewhere here. And one of my students actually is in the room here, Cam. And so the scientific freediving is a course that that teaches students and anyone to have that tool, to learn how to breathe and to learn how to hold your breath. It's when you learn how to suppress the urge to breathe that you can really enjoy yourself. And the reason why I became an athlete is because to push your knowledge on breathing and become a better freediver, those competitions are the best. And you cannot compete with people. You compete with yourself only, because you cannot do more than what your body can do. And that entitled a lot of training, and that's why we're training a lot with Pete. And yes, and knowing Sanjeev at the School of Communication has been really very useful for me to learn how to communicate. And I'm not a very good communicator. I can write, I can dive. When you dive, you don't speak. So these are my best partner.
We can see the.
Okay, Tito, I think we could run our video clip. So that's the first time Claire saw it open cut. Hopefully she's okay with it. Again, as it says, it's a work in progress. We really just wanted to. We have whole other scenes we didn't even try and get properly contextualized, but we have big plans to take Claire around the world to swim with some megafauna like whales and dolphins, and get her son and daughter swimming with her to sort of show the generations. Because I'm going to have Sanjeev speak to this now, but because I work on mainstream theatrical films, I really needed an outlet for ocean advocacy, and to collaborate with Sanjeev and Claire is providing me a perfect outlet to use some of my time to give back to the ocean, which has given me so much. And Sanjeev is really an expert at storytelling, particularly for the purpose of inspiring children to take the next correct steps in their lives. So I'm going to let him speak to that a little bit, how we plan to use this film that way.
I don't really want to be the professor. But it's very simple things. I think that what has happened, and I spend a lot of time in other countries, specifically India. As a matter of fact, the film that Speed was talking about, that's the precursor to this called One Water, is currently showing in 1,000 schools all over India, and we are mapping it on a Google map, and children are uploading their artwork and their poetry on the Google map so that they can see themselves in the world when they've never left the village that they live in because they've never had the opportunity to do so. So that's the kind of work I'm involved in because I'm a professor and it's a different world, it gets financed differently. There are resources out there, we are in the grants world and we write grants and we basically, the model always is that we raise resources as we go along. We have an idea, we pitch it, you get a little bit of money to develop it, and then you go do things like this that are silly in many ways to reveal what you're doing, but we find a lot of inspiration in doing it in this way. So as we move forward, as Pete says, that it's an ambitious project. I think we can get there as we move forward. Apart from certainly having television and festival aspirations, I think our aspiration is in this project that you're seeing as a film, but there are other projects that maybe Claire wants to talk about, I don't know, that are in the VR, AR space that is exactly this, but in a different form. There's going to be also audio stuff that is going to be this story, but in a different form. So academics have invented this term called transmedia, to have different platforms to do the same thing for different audiences using different media. So in that sense, it's a big idea that we are trying to unleash here. Let's see where it goes.
The VR project is a virtual reality of the deepest blue hole that we've seen. This is one of the deepest blue hole in the ocean, and it's just next door in the Bahamas. So the VR project is just to bring that blue hole alive for children and teenagers and students to understand a little bit what the role of this blue hole has in the ocean. There are many more blue holes and it's very unknown. It's part of also the Bahamian civilization, and there are legends around those blue holes, so it's really interesting to bring that with the VR experience so everybody can just look at it in 3 dimension.
Claire, could you explain a little bit how you study the blue holes as a sort of way to study the way fish larvae and plankton move in the pelagic waters, but that because the blue hole is so deep, it allows you to study pelagic movements so close to shore with.
Right. So that's really interesting because the blue hole, as you see, is very circular. It's like a hole because it's really deep. It can be a little ocean, and at the shallow edge of the blue hole and the first ledges, there are coral reefs, very healthy coral reefs. So at the same time, it becomes like a mesocosm of a reef ecosystem and oceanic ecosystem. We've collected many different species of fish larvae. Some that are coming in are completely pelagic larvae from tunas and other very oceanic fishes, and some of them are coral reef fish. So in the planktonic realm, you can find even mesopelagic fishes. Everybody becomes, every organism in the ocean started their life small, basically. So the deep blue hole has a very easy access with shallow beach and bay, and at the same time it's an oceanic environment. So we use acoustic tools to listen to what is in the blue hole, and we collect larvae, and so this is kind of very special. We look at animal navigation. So there are many aspects of that blue hole that we don't know, but it can also be used as a mini ocean.
We are going to have to, sorry, wrong spot. We're going to have to end this thrilling talk. It was a beautiful excerpt, and we've all been so excited, I think. Thank you so much. Incredible. I don't want it to end. We want you to come back next year and tell us more. And if you'd like to continue the Q&A, you may outdoors. Thank you so much. Warm round of applause again.